The final day of racing saw competitors follow a reversal of the previous day's 420-kilometre route to the finish at Gaborone Showgrounds. Once again, it was a pre-dawn start, but only 26 cars of the 50 that started were still in the contest. With a short, by desert race standards, 420-kilometre blast ahead of them, Reinicker in the Vankwin Toyota Hilux led Woolridge away from the start, and the race for line honours was on. Traditionally, the real racing starts on the last leg, when there's nothing to lose and everything to gain. With no servicing restrictions at the overnight stop, Burain was able to repair his gear linkage and hoped to maintain his special category lead. By the time the sun had risen, Reinicker's lead was being eroded by Woolridge and Vermaak, whose Nissan Sani is one of the most powerful cars in off-road racing. Normally being first on the road is difficult as there are no tracks to follow, but this was the same route as the previous day, so tracks were clearly marked and both drivers were throwing caution to the wind as they churned up the Kalahari sand. Coetzee and Leek are fighters and set about reducing their 10-minute deficit. All they needed was for the leaders to wrong slot or get bogged down, and they would be in with a shout for victory. An early problem for Burain saw Pinoy and Jackson heading the special vehicle class, and they were charging along merrily and full of confidence in their car, which so far hadn't missed a beat. Burain's problem hadn't been serious, and he was soon back in full flight and gaining on Pinoy. Apart from being passed by Pinoy, Coetzee and Leek had also got ahead, and he was now fifth on the road. But the dark horse was the Raceco, driven by the Chepex. They're experienced racers and have been racing the same car, which has proved to be very reliable for 3 seasons. With an hour in hand over his opposition, Vickers van Deventer on the Jojo Tanks Yamaha Banshee was looking very relaxed. Behind him, his rivals, headed by Billy Coetzee on the lone Polaris, were fairly well spread out. As usual, the bikes were spectacular, and despite this close call, Vowles looked as though he was well in control at the head of the field. Still holding second was the smooth-riding 23-year-old Kavina, who by this time had been expected to crumble under the pressure. Less than a minute had separated Trethewey from Van Niekerk and Fisher at the start, and Trethewey was also determined to keep pace with the leaders, but lost a few precious seconds by overshooting. Van Niekerk churned up the desert on his Honda 125. Alfie Cox showed why he's regarded as the best rider in the country and hauled through the field to claim 5th place by outfoxing his fellow KTM rider Kevin Fisher as they risked the thorns by attempting to find the shortest route possible between the unforgiving trees. Behind Wayne Farmer, who was second in the 200 class, Johan Smith was running well in 8th place on his unsponsored Honda 250. One of the few Yamaha-mounted riders was Terry Waters, and he was doing a superb job in holding a very narrow third in the 200 class, ahead of his Kawasaki-mounted class rival Adrian Hofmeyer. Next up in the 200 class was Peter Milan on yet another Kawasaki KDX. Out front, things were really hotting up, and Woolridge had managed to get ahead of the Toyota as they reached the service point. But Reinicker's turnaround time was better. He rejoined with a slender lead, only to lose valuable seconds stuck behind a cow. Woolridge had now shown his cards and kept up the pressure on the long fast straights, which had cars running at maximum speed and outrunning the helicopter. Driving a car at top speed over soft sand is hard work. Coetzee recorded speeds of around the 180 km/h region in the turbo Castrol Toyota Hilux. but he was closing slightly on the leaders and the stage was being set for a thrilling finale. There was also a terrific battle developing for the special vehicle honours as Pinoy and Jackson were working hard to keep Burain's nimble single-seater projectile at bay. At each marshal point, Burain checked the gap to Pinoy and found that he was closing steadily. Pinoy, on the other hand, had no idea how far Burain was behind and had no choice but to drive as hard as possible. Richard Carolyn in the lubrication equipment race car had picked up places in the morning and found himself well placed after the Chefex had retired their V-Motors Epson race car with a broken gearbox. But his race was to end soon after this bush clearing exercise when his gearbox casing split open. After their earlier problems with a lost sump plug, which was repaired after the retiring Volverons had towed them into the service area, Alberts and Klaasen had made up a lot of time and were clearly in a hurry. Also handily placed was the Porsche race car of Hilton Laurie and David Coombs. Some deft driving saw them in contention for a top 3 Class A placing. There'd been a big scare for Rob Walk and Greg Wiebel when the front of the race car's floor pan had come loose at high speed and acted as a shovel. That and other niggling problems had cost them over 2 hours. Despite battling to follow the route, Toyota Hilux crew Schumi and Karel van Vuren were dominating proceedings in Class E for near-standard four-wheel drive vehicles. Redden and Joseph had been assisted by the Van Vurens when they stopped to right the four-sticks Land Rover after putting it on its side earlier in the day, and then Redden overshot the same corner in sympathy. Mark Laurie and Warren Morton had a character-building race so far and were almost last, running just ahead of Barbaspan Motor Club members and local farmers Yanni and Chris Visser, whose old Toyota Land Cruiser seemed ready to expire at any moment. A seized motor had almost sidelined Van Deventer, who, thinking his race was over, had a half-an-hour nap before he was woken up by someone offering to tow him in an effort to restart, and he was able to rejoin. Alex Vowles and Marco Cavina were still going at it hammer and tongs. Both were on the ragged edge of control, and to make matters worse, Vowles' Unterlegs Dairy KTM had a broken side stand spring, while Cavina found himself running off the road at times. With the last of the Breckles having retired earlier in the day, Adrian High was holding a worthy third in the quad category behind Coetzee's very effective McPherson strut-equipped Polaris. Sixth in the little four-wheeler class and finding the thick sand tough going was Kevin Pereira. Soft sand provides motorcyclists with the ultimate test of fitness, and Lance Trafui was still holding third place and had passed the 7th place quad of Francois Fenter. The face of the race changed dramatically as the leaders tackled the last leg back to Gaborone. Reiniger and Houghton had lost their lead after a rear differential failure, and this left the jubilant Nissan Sani crew with a healthy lead over Coetzee and Leek. It was with an almost win-or-nothing attitude that Coetzee tackled the riverbed for the last time. There was a new leader in the special vehicle class as Burain's never-give-up attitude had seen him pass Pinoy and Jackson with a mere 100 kilometres of the race left. Burain was showing all the style of a championship-winning single-seater ace, which he almost was in his circuit racing days. Pinoy and Jackson had also benefited from the Bankford Toyota's problem, and they were holding 4th place after passing Reiniger, while he and Houghton were busy removing the rear prop shaft, which left the Toyota with front-wheel drive only. Needless to say, progress was slow and tedious as the front wheels dragged 2 tons of Land Cruiser along. Vowles and Cavina were still engaged in their brilliant all-out scrap at the front of the motorcycle category and were in sight of each other as they blasted down the dry river. But soon after the riverbed, Cavina picked up a puncture and was forced to concede defeat, a heartbreaking end to a thrilling race. Cox's tremendous fight back from a 30-minute deficit in the morning had brought him up to 3rd place, but he was still 15 minutes behind. The last obstacle before the finish was the flooded Lobatse Road a few kilometres from the end, and it provided a convenient opportunity for Woolridge and Vermaak to wash their Nissan Sani before reaching the checkered flag. The Castrol Toyota Hilux managed a good impression of an offshore powerboat as Coetzee kept the pedal to the metal and waded through. Everything kept going right for the Nissan Sani, and Woolridge and Vermaak cruised home to score their most important off-road race victory to date. Had it not been for Coetzee and Leake's puncture on the first day, which cost him 10 minutes, the race could have been rather different as they came home almost exactly 10 minutes behind. A delighted Burain hung on to claim the special vehicle class and third overall ahead of Pinoy and Coombs, while Reiniger and Houghton survived to take fifth. Almost an hour behind Reiniger, Laurie and Coombs took the flag, and they were almost an hour ahead of the Class E winning Toyota Hilux of the Van Vierens.
We had a game plan where we said we would take it easy from the start and not go mad and just hang in with the guys, and we were 3 minutes behind at the overnight, which is just what we wanted. And then from today we pushed hard. We caught RP just before the refuel and got past him, and it's been plain sailing since then.
As Reiniger came in to finish, so did motorcycle winner Alex Vowles on the Antilex Derry KTM. But there was a last-minute scare in store as he had to avoid Houghton's suddenly opened door. Alfie Cox eventually claimed second place, with Lance Trethewey taking third ahead of Kevin Fisher, who passed the luckless Kavina near the end. Von Deventer cruised home to win and pick up an extra 5,000 Rand for winning his class in all the Total Super Series 96 events held to date. Runner-up was Billy Coetzee on the lone Polaris, while Johannesburg Yamaha's Christo van der Merwe maintained his 100% winning record in the 200 class with a fine 8th place. Round 5 of the South African Off-Road Championship is the Settler 400, which takes place near Port Elizabeth on the 9th and the 10th of August.